1911. Standard Oil will be destroyed. The Supreme Court has spoken. 34 companies. Forced separation. The journalists celebrate. The politicians congratulate each other. John D. Rockefeller is on a golf course when he hears the news. He finishes the hole. Within months, his net worth begins to rise. He started with nothing. No connections, no money, no name anyone recognized. Just a red ledger and a decision made at age 12 that he was going to keep score forever. 120 years later, a 19-year-old drops out of Harvard. He has a half-finished programming language, a business partner, and a handshake deal with a computer company that doesn't yet know it's about to make him the richest man on Earth. That man was Bill Gates. Sell software to everyone forever. One of these men will be remembered as the greatest. The other built everything he used to get there. Let's find out. In 1872, the railroads made a secret deal, not with a country, not with a government, with one man. For every barrel John D. Rockefeller shipped, he paid half the normal rate. And for every barrel his competitors shipped, on the same trains, on the same tracks, Rockefeller received a commission. His rivals were paying to destroy themselves. They just didn't know it yet. This is how Rockefeller got rich. Not by being the best refiner, not by discovering the most oil, by controlling the system that everyone else depended on, invisibly, systematically, before anyone understood what was happening. Within a decade, that system had made him the most financially dominant individual in American history. At his peak, his fortune represented nearly 1.5% of the entire US GDP, equivalent to somewhere between $435 and $630 billion in today's dollars, depending on how you calculate it. Here's what that number means in practice. Bill Gates, the man who became the face of modern wealth, peaked at around 0.5% of US GDP, approximately $185 billion in today's dollars. Rockefeller was proportionally 3 times as rich as the richest man of the digital age. He could buy every company Gates ever built, do it again, and still be the richest man in the room. Winner? John D. Rockefeller. But money without power is just a number. Let's talk about what he did with it. Cleveland, Ohio, 1872. Rockefeller calls a meeting. Not a negotiation, not a debate, a meeting. He invites the major oil refiners of the city, his competitors, into a room. He opens his books, shows them his costs, his margins, his scale. Then he makes an offer. Sell now at a fair price or compete and lose everything. He gives them time to think. 22 of 26 sell within 6 weeks. Not because he threatened them, because the numbers were undeniable. Fighting Rockefeller was not a business decision. It was a financial death sentence, and he showed them the math before they had to learn it the hard way. Now, Bill Gates. The year is 1980. IBM needs an operating system for its new personal computer. Gates doesn't have one. He says yes anyway, hangs up the phone, buys an operating system from a programmer down the street for $50,000, renames it MS-DOS, licenses it back to IBM for a royalty on every machine they sell. IBM builds the machine. Gates owns the engine inside it. By 1995, Windows runs on 90% of all personal computers on Earth. The government came for both of them. Standard Oil broken into 34 pieces in 1911. Rockefeller walked away richer. Microsoft nearly broken up in 2001. Gates negotiated a settlement and walked away. Neither fully stopped, neither fully lost. But only one of them made his rivals choose between selling and dying. Winner? John D. Rockefeller. Gates built a monopoly. Rockefeller built an ultimatum: sell or face bankruptcy. But how each of them built it, that's a different story entirely. In 1879, a government investigator sits down to answer a simple question: how much of the American oil industry does John D. Rockefeller control? He starts pulling records. The refineries have separate names, separate owners on paper, separate addresses across a dozen states. Different everything. It takes years to understand that it is all the same man. Rockefeller didn't build an empire. He built a fog. Acquisitions filed under different names, subsidiaries operating independently on paper, competitive threats absorbed so quietly that the market didn't notice until it was already over. He wasn't the most visible man in the oil industry. He was the least visible, which is exactly how he wanted it. Bill Gates built differently. He was always visible, always present, testifying before Congress, on magazine covers, fighting his antitrust case in public, in real time, with the world watching.
But the leverage was just as precise. He understood one thing that IBM, Compaq, Dell, and every hardware company missed. The software running the machine was worth more than the machine itself. He licensed, never sold. He collected royalties, not salaries. He made every hardware company on Earth dependent on his software before they realized what was happening. Rockefeller controlled the physical infrastructure of energy. Gates controlled the digital infrastructure of information. Both understood the same truth. Don't own the product, own the system the product runs on. But one of them did it in a much harder room. Winner, Bill Gates. Same instinct, harder environment. Rockefeller built in the dark. Gates built with the world watching, and won anyway. Both men spent their fortunes, but what they chose to do with that money, that's where the story turns completely. In 1889, John D. Rockefeller opened a ledger, not to count what he had, to count what he was going to give away. He had been doing this since his first paycheck at 16, 10% to the church, without exception. But by 1889, 10% of John D. Rockefeller's income was more money than most governments spent on public health. So he started spending it like one. He didn't write checks and move on. He built systems. His foundation identified hookworm disease, a parasitic infection quietly destroying the productivity of millions of people across the American South. Invisible, treatable, ignored. Rockefeller funded a campaign that eventually reached 52 countries. He didn't announce it, he didn't take credit. He just sent the money and the doctors. He founded the University of Chicago. He created the modern American medical education system. His foundation's report closed dozens of fraudulent medical schools and established the standards every doctor in America still trains under today. He did all of this before tax incentives existed for philanthropy, before public relations made generosity profitable, before anyone told him it was good for his image. He did it because he believed, with the same certainty he brought to Standard Oil, that systematic giving was the most efficient use of capital on Earth. Now, Bill Gates. In 2000, he created the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He studied Rockefeller's model, the focus on public health, the use of data, the foundation's structure, the idea that private wealth could solve problems governments couldn't. Then he scaled it. Over $60 billion given, 140 countries, polio nearly eradicated, malaria deaths cut in half in targeted regions. The Giving Pledge, convincing the world's billionaires to give away the majority of their fortunes. Gates didn't just follow Rockefeller's model. He showed the world it could work at planetary scale. But here is the question that matters for this round. Who invented the philosophy? And who inherited it? Rockefeller gave without incentive, without credit, without a model to follow. He built the template from nothing, in an era that called him a monster for everything he did. Gates arrived a century later, with Rockefeller's blueprint, tax incentives, public admiration, and a world that was ready to celebrate him for it. Winner? John D. Rockefeller. Gates gave more in absolute numbers, but modern philanthropy has one author, and it is not Bill Gates. One round left, and this one belongs to the man history decided to remember. Ask anyone on the street to name the greatest philanthropist in history. They will say Bill Gates. Ask them to name the greatest villain of American capitalism.
Some of them will say John D. Rockefeller. Both answers are incomplete. And that gap between what Rockefeller did and how he is remembered is the most revealing thing about how legacy actually works. Here is what Rockefeller's legacy looks like in practice. The University of Chicago he founded has outlasted every oil company he built and produced over 100 Nobel laureates along the way. The medical standards his foundation established in 1910 still govern how every doctor in America is trained today. The public health infrastructure he funded became the blueprint for the World Health Organization. And the companies born from Standard Oil's forced breakup, ExxonMobil, Chevron, BP, still power the global economy, carrying his architecture forward without his name. His legacy didn't shrink after his death. It multiplied, silently, without his name on it. And yet, when the world writes the story of generosity, it writes Bill Gates. Because Gates understood something Rockefeller never did. Legacy is not what you build. Legacy is what people choose to remember. Gates built his foundation in public. He gave interviews, he wrote books, he appeared at conferences. He made his giving visible, not out of vanity, but because visibility is what convinces other billionaires to follow. The Giving Pledge exists because Gates understood that generosity, like everything else, needs a market. Rockefeller gave in silence and let history decide. History decided against him for a century, and then quietly admitted he had been right about almost everything. Gates will not have that problem. His narrative is already written, already celebrated, already taught in schools. When he dies, the world will mourn a man who tried to save it. No rehabilitation needed, no century of waiting. Winner? Bill Gates. Rockefeller built more, but Gates will be remembered. History is not a scoreboard. It is a story. And in this chapter, the chapter of legacy, Gates wrote a better one. Final score: John D. Rockefeller, 3 rounds. Bill Gates, 2. Rockefeller wins the money, the monopoly, and the philanthropy. Gates wins how he built it. Gates wins the legacy, for now. But here's what this scorecard doesn't say. Bill Gates is one of the most celebrated men alive. John D. Rockefeller was one of the most hated men who ever lived, while doing almost exactly the same things, and history called him a monster. Gates had better PR, a better era, a better narrative. But the man he learned from, the man who invented the playbook, never got the credit. Perhaps the real question isn't who was richer. Perhaps it's this: does it matter how you build it if what you leave behind is the same? Leave your answer in the comments.